Humans weren't supposed to win. Every measure of probability, every prediction, every assumption made by those who calculated the odds said failure was inevitable. Every system, every law of chance, every expectation lined up against them. And yet, against all reason, they did. That alone should make the truth sink in for anyone who dares to look at their own life. The world isn't waiting to hand out victories. The world doesn't owe anyone a break. Every moment is a battlefield, and the first harsh reality is that survival, success, and triumph are not given. They are seized. And if they were meant to fail, then why are they here, standing on the rubble of the impossible, staring at a reality they were told they could never touch? The same principle applies to anyone who hesitates, who waits for permission, who convinces themselves that the impossible is out of reach. Limits exist only because they are accepted. Chains exist only because they are not challenged. And fear exists only because it is entertained. There is something painfully honest in admitting it. Life does not bend for those who linger in indecision. Waiting, hesitating, and hoping for the perfect moment is a form of surrender. Humans won the impossible war not because the universe blessed them with flawless timing or infinite resources, but because they refused to be paralyzed by circumstances. The first victory is in showing up. The first battle is in choosing action when everything in the mind screams stop. Every second spent in doubt is a victory handed to failure. Every excuse is a retreat, a silent surrender to forces that exist only in the imagination. Humans did not win by being clever. They won by refusing to obey the rules that said they couldn't. They did not wait for strength to arrive. They created it by movement, by effort, by relentless refusal to bow to expectation. And here lies a brutal truth. The impossible war is not just fought against external enemies, it is fought inside. The battle is against the creeping lethargy, the whispered doubts, the small but consistent decisions that slowly shrink ambition and self-belief. Humans faced despair, they faced exhaustion, they faced failure after failure, and yet they kept moving forward. Every loss, every wound, every setback was a step toward mastery, because mastery is born not in the comfort of victory, but in the furnace of persistence. This is the mirror held up to anyone who thinks their potential is limited by circumstance. Limits are illusions, constraints are optional, and fear is negotiable. What humans won outside, they first conquered inside, and the world did not stop them. They stopped themselves only when they chose to. If the impossible can be won by humans, what excuses remain credible? If the odds can be defied on a scale that seems unimaginable, why settle for mediocrity in your own life? The chains of hesitation, procrastination, and doubt are as fragile as the belief that created them. To stand still is to accept defeat. To question the possibility of victory is to surrender before the fight begins. Humans won the impossible war not because they were extraordinary in ways the world could measure, but because they refused to be ordinary in the ways the world demanded. The first lesson in this truth is undeniable. The war you face is already yours to fight, and every second you hesitate, the impossible grows more distant. The only power that matters is the power to act, and humans won because they chose that power when everything else whispered surrender. You've been told your whole life to stay in line. Follow the rules, stay safe, play small, wait for permission, and maybe, just maybe, success will knock on the door. Every system, every expectation, every voice around you has trained you to obey, to settle, to shrink in the face of challenge. That is exactly how wars are lost before a single battle is fought. Humans didn't win by obeying rules they were handed. They won by breaking them, by refusing to be limited by what others said was possible. Every chain society places on ambition, every invisible cage built from tradition, comfort, and conformity is a setup for quiet surrender. The same forces are active now, shaping thoughts, shaping choices, shaping what is deemed safe or acceptable. And anyone who follows them without question is already losing ground. The truth is brutal. Comfort is not neutral. Comfort is not harmless. Comfort is the slow killer of potential, the thief of dreams. the silent force that convinces the mind that surviving is enough, that playing it safe is the smartest strategy. Every human who has won against impossible odds ignored comfort. They ignored the easy path, the path everyone else took, the path lined with reassurance and approval. That path leads to irrelevance. That path leads to quiet, invisible defeat. Humans didn't win because the easy road vanished. They won because they chose the harder road over and over again, long after others had stopped walking. And the same choice exists for anyone willing to see it. To accept that safety is often disguised as failure, that approval is often disguised as weakness, and that the rules you've been taught to obey are often written to keep you small. This is the first shocking truth: rules are not reality. Rules are a reflection of someone else's limits, someone else's fear, someone else's vision of what is possible. Following them blindly is the quickest way to surrender without a fight. The impossible war was never about obeying. It was about choosing when to disobey, when to ignore the boundaries imposed by fear, when to act despite warning and doubt. Every human who achieved the impossible did so by recognizing that the path everyone else followed was not the path to victory. They realized that limitation is often manufactured and freedom is claimed, not granted. And the bitter realization follows. Most people will never see this because they never question, they never act, they never challenge. They remain comfortable, and comfort keeps them dead in the water while the world moves forward. The second harsh reality is this: waiting. For certainty is a trap. Humans didn't wait for perfect conditions. They moved anyway. They moved when every sign screamed no, when every voice shouted doubt, when every instinct screamed stop. Waiting for a safe moment is surrender disguised as patience. It is procrastination, dressed up in wisdom. Humans won the impossible war because they refused to let uncertainty paralyze them. They faced risk and embraced discomfort as the vehicle for change. And that is the lesson waiting in plain sight. Growth, progress, victory, and freedom are never comfortable. They are forged in moments that demand courage, persistence, and a willingness to act when everything in the mind says not to. To lose without a fight is easy. To hide behind rules and comfort is effortless. Humans won because they refused to hide. They refused to obey limitations that were not their own. They refused to let fear dictate their choices. The same battlefield exists now in every life that hesitates, every mind that doubts, every heart that seeks comfort over challenge. The war is not outside, it is inside. And the first victory is in realizing that the rules you have followed are not the rules of reality. They are the rules of surrender. To choose otherwise is to start fighting. Here's the first brutal truth: no one is coming to save you. Forget the stories where someone swoops in at the last second to fix everything. Forget the voices that promise support, luck, or divine intervention. The world doesn't stop to rescue anyone, and it certainly won't pause for hesitation or indecision. Friends, family, mentors, and circumstances are unreliable at best. Waiting for help is the slowest way to die quietly. Humans won the impossible war because they stopped waiting for someone else to deliver victory. They realized that the only reliable force in existence is action. Unyielding, relentless, personal action. Every second spent hoping for salvation is a second lost, a second surrendered to forces that don't care whether you live or die. The war is not out there. It is inside, and the first enemy is the belief that someone else will fight it for you. The second brutal truth: the battle is against yourself more than anything else. Every hesitation, every excuse, every fleeting comfort is a personal surrender. Humans won not because enemies were weak or challenges were kind, but because they refused to give up on themselves. Every mind that whispers doubt, every instinct that screams retreat, every habit that fosters delay is a battlefield waiting to be claimed. Most people fight this war unconsciously, allowing the internal saboteur to dictate outcomes. They measure success by external permission rather than internal resolve, and as a result they fail without even understanding why. Humans understood the battlefield. They knew that conquering themselves first is the only way to conquer anything else. The third brutal truth is harsh but unavoidable. Most people have already surrendered, and they don't even know it. The world is full of quiet capitulations. People trade ambition for comfort, effort for convenience, courage for reassurance. The impossible war is not lost to enemies. It is lost to the mind that refuses to act, the body that refuses to endure, the soul that convinces itself that small victories are enough. Humans won because they saw the surrender, called it by name, and refused to join it. Every moment they moved forward while the rest hesitated, every risk they took while others retreated, every repetition they endured while others complained, they gained ground, slowly but inevitably. And that is the harsh mirror. Most of what stops success is not circumstance but choice. There is a subtle shift buried in these truths. Waiting for rescue is a trap. Fearing oneself is fatal. And surrender disguised as patience is the enemy of progress. Humans discovered that the impossible isn't defeated by hope. It is defeated by action, by refusing to yield to doubt, by embracing the grind, by taking responsibility when no one else will. And that is a lesson that cannot be softened. If victory is to be won, it must be claimed. Excuses will not fight for you. Comfort will not fight for you. Other people will not fight for you. The war is yours, and only you can march into it, bare, relentless, uncompromising. To survive is not enough. To endure is not enough. To win, the first step is brutal honesty. No one is coming. No one is stopping the clock. The battlefield does not wait. And the only way forward is to stop pretending someone else will fight for what only you can take. Humans won because they accepted this truth and acted anyway. Those who refuse it will remain exactly where they are, imagining war, but never winning it. The impossible war wasn't won by brute strength or raw talent. It wasn't won by luck, divine favor, or being in the right place at the right time. It was won by endurance, by persistence, by the unglamorous, unrelenting act of showing up when every fiber of being screamed to stop. Every second spent fighting, against exhaustion, against doubt, against circumstances that seemed insurmountable, was a victory in itself. Humans understood something most never grasp. Consistency beats brilliance. Repetition beats inspiration. Effort beats intention. You can have all the ideas, all the motivation, all the reasons to succeed, but if you fail to endure, you fail before the battle even begins. Every moment you choose ease over action is a moment you surrender. Humans won because they endured. When others quit. When comfort whispered louder than courage. When doubt screamed over hope. Endurance is more than just showing up. It is choosing to move forward despite failure, despite pain, despite the crushing weight of expectation. Humans knew the impossible war would strip them down. It would test them to the edge of what they could tolerate, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And yet, they kept moving, step by step, day by day, victory by victory. Even when there was no applause, no recognition, no visible sign of progress. That is what endurance looks like. Quiet, relentless, invisible to anyone who hasn't experienced it. The difference between those who win and those who don't is not always dramatic or flashy. It is the willingness to continue when everything in the body, mind, and world screams stop. Humans weren't remarkable because they were gifted. They were remarkable because they refused to yield. Here is a harsh realization. The battle is not always against enemies or circumstances. Most of the resistance comes from inside. The mind, the habits, the self-imposed limitations that make comfort feel like safety and effort feel unbearable. Humans won the impossible war by staring into the face of themselves and refusing to blink. Every fear, every insecurity, every hesitation was treated not as a reason to stop, but as a signal of what must be conquered. The war is not external. It is internal first, and until the inner resistance is broken, no external challenge can ever be truly overcome. People who fail do so not because the odds are impossible, but because they lack the stamina to endure, the courage to persist, and the patience to continue when there is nothing to show for it. The lesson is painfully simple and brutally honest. Endurance is the ultimate weapon. Action without consistency is wasted. Courage without persistence is meaningless. Humans won because they understood this law better than anyone else. They embraced the monotony, the repetition, the unglamorous grind, because they knew that every step, no matter how small, was a step toward the impossible. Every setback was a lesson. Every failure was fuel. Every painful moment was a building block for eventual triumph. And the realization that should hit hardest is this: winning isn't about feeling ready or perfect. Winning is about enduring when nothing feels right, when nothing is certain, when the odds are stacked against you. If you wait for strength, clarity, or approval, you will fail. If you quit at the first sign of discomfort, you will fail. Humans won because they endured. They moved when no one else moved. They persisted when no one else persisted. The impossible war is never about winning in a day. It is about refusing to quit, ever, no matter how impossible it seems. Every person who survives, every person who thrives, every person who conquers the impossible must carry this truth in their mind. Endurance is not optional. It is everything. Here's the second harsh truth. You are addicted to comfort. Not in the obvious way, not just in the soft, lazy sense of lounging on a couch, scrolling endlessly, or avoiding work. It's deeper. Comfort is the invisible prison built from routines, habits, and excuses. It whispers that safety is more important than growth, that ease is better than challenge, that small, predictable outcomes are enough to call life successful. Humans won the impossible war not because they avoided discomfort, they embraced it. They made pain, struggle, and risk their teachers. Every second spent hiding in comfort is a second the war moves without you. Every moment you choose convenience over effort, safety over challenge, you reinforce weakness as a permanent state. Comfort is a slow killer disguised as relief, and most people never notice the chains it wraps around them until it is too late. Humans didn't wait for pain to disappear. They didn't avoid struggle. They didn't negotiate with difficulty. They faced it head-on day after day, knowing that the only path to victory was through hardship, not around it. That is a lesson few are willing to learn. The world does not reward ease. It does not bow to convenience. The impossible is never conquered by someone unwilling to bleed for it, sweat for it, sacrifice for it. Yet you, like most, wait for the perfect moment, the comfortable window, the easy solution. That is a trap. Waiting for ease is surrender, disguised as patience. Humans didn't win because the battlefield was kind. They won because they refused to let comfort dictate their choices, and the same decision faces anyone who wants more from life. Continue to hide in comfort, or step into struggle and claim what is possible. The addiction to comfort is subtle, but pervasive. It appears in tiny compromises, choosing distraction over focus, choosing sleep over discipline, choosing temporary relief over long-term gain. These small acts accumulate, slowly eroding potential, ambition, and courage. Humans understood this better than most. They didn't wait for a grand moment to act. They acted in the small moments consistently, even when it hurt. They created momentum in discomfort. They learned that growth is born not from ease but from enduring what others refuse to endure. Every victory they claimed, every impossible feat they accomplished, began with a refusal to indulge comfort, a refusal to let pain be the excuse that ended their fight before it began. Here's the brutal realization. Comfort is a liar. It pretends to protect you while it destroys you. It pretends to shield you while it chains you. Every second surrendered to it is a choice to remain small. Every moment you prioritize ease over effort is a moment you confirm mediocrity as your identity. Humans won the impossible war because they rejected comfort at every turn. They made sacrifice, pain, and struggle the normal, not the exception. And the hardest truth for anyone who dreams of success is that comfort isn't a challenge. It is the enemy. To overcome, it is not enough to want change. It is not enough to hope. You must actively choose struggle, deliberately embrace discomfort, and attack the habits that make ease feel like safety. Humans did not win by following the comfortable path. They won by breaking it, stepping beyond it, and daring to endure the fire that most refuse to face. The impossible war is not won by those who rest. It is won by those who fight, sweat, and bleed when comfort tells them to quit. Every person still waiting for ease is already surrendering. Humans won because they refused to, and that refusal is the first real weapon anyone can wield. Humans didn't win because they were fearless. That is a lie the world loves to tell itself. Fear is not weakness. Fear is proof that the stakes are real, that the challenge is worthy, that survival is never guaranteed. The people who accomplished the impossible felt fear every single day. They faced it, stared it down, and moved anyway. Fear never disappeared. Doubt never vanished. Uncertainty never cleared the path. What changed was not their emotions. It was their decision to stop letting those emotions control their choices. That is the truth most refuse to admit. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action despite fear. The impossible war was won by those who acted when every instinct screamed retreat, when every rational thought argued surrender. Humans moved forward because they understood that hesitation, driven by fear, is the fastest route to defeat. Fear is an intimate, personal enemy. It resides in the quiet moments when the mind whispers, maybe this isn't for you, or maybe you'll fail. It shows up in the body as tension, in the stomach as knots, in the voice as doubt. Most people listen to it and obey. Most people stop. Most people rationalize surrender as wisdom. Humans didn't do that. They acknowledged fear, named it, and refused to grant it power over action. Fear was never ignored. It was treated like a compass, an indicator of where the battle mattered most, and they moved toward it instead of away. That is the distinction between victory and defeat. Moving toward the very thing that scares you. Waiting for fear to vanish is a lie. Humans won because they stopped negotiating with it. They treated fear like an opponent to outlast, not a barrier to avoid. Here's a truth that is hard to swallow. Fear is inevitable, but paralysis is optional. Every human who achieved the impossible felt terror, hesitation, uncertainty, and doubt. The difference was that they refused to let those feelings dictate their decisions. Every failure, every setback, every close call could have ended the war before it began. Yet they endured because action, repeated and consistent, trumps emotion every single time. Humans didn't win by being fearless. They won by refusing to surrender to the fear that lives inside every mind. Every step forward was a choice. Move despite fear or stay still and accept defeat. The world rewards those who move, not those who wait for confidence or clarity. Doubt works the same way. Doubt is the quiet cousin of fear, whispering that limits are real, that chances are slim, that failure is inevitable. Most people listen. Most people pause. Most people let doubt decide for them. Humans didn't. Doubt was acknowledged, analyzed, and then ignored when action was required. The impossible war demanded movement, not permission from the mind. And that is the lesson. That cannot be softened. Fear and doubt are never reasons to stop. They are indicators of what matters most. Proof that the war is worth fighting. Proof that every action matters. The final realization is unavoidable. The enemy is never fully external. Fear and doubt will always exist. Humans won not because they were without fear, but because they refused to let fear control them. Every person who waits for fear to vanish is surrendering before the fight even begins. The impossible war is won by those who act despite fear, who endure despite doubt, who refuse to bow to the mind's excuses. That refusal is the weapon. That refusal is the power. And it is available to anyone willing to use it. Here's the shift that changes everything, and it's not subtle. Stop asking, "Can I do this?" That question is a trap, a polite form of surrender. It frames action as optional, frames struggle as negotiable, and frames risk as something to avoid. The human who won the impossible war didn't ask if they could. They asked if they were willing to suffer for it. That is the real question, the only one that matters. Talent, luck, preparation, and timing are irrelevant without the willingness to endure pain, discomfort, and relentless repetition. You are surrounded by illusions of possibility and excuses disguised as strategy, and asking, "Can I?" is just another form of hiding from the truth. If the cost isn't paid, the reward will never arrive. Humans didn't wait for conditions to be perfect. They didn't negotiate with difficulty. They acted every day, every hour, because they understood that willingness to suffer is the currency of the impossible. Pain is unavoidable. Discomfort is inevitable. Failure is guaranteed at some point. Humans accepted all of it and treated it as fuel. Every obstacle, every setback, every moment that felt unbearable became the engine of progress. The shift is simple. Stop framing difficulty as punishment. Start seeing it as proof that the fight is real. Proof that what you are pursuing matters. Proof that every choice shapes the battlefield. Humans didn't win by avoiding suffering. They won because they embraced it. Every choice, every step, every repetition was deliberately aligned with the understanding that only suffering can produce results worth having. That realization is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. If you are unwilling to endure, you are already defeated. If you are willing, the impossible becomes inevitable. There is a second brutal truth embedded in this shift. Effort without direction is meaningless, but direction without commitment is worse. Most people know what they should do. They have plans, dreams, visions, and goals. They even know the steps to take. Yet they wait, hesitate, and rationalize inaction because the path is hard. Humans won because they refused to negotiate with difficulty. They refused to pause until the discomfort felt tolerable. They treated commitment like a weapon, wielding it relentlessly. And they allowed pain to sharpen, not weaken, them. Every moment spent acting despite fear, despite doubt, despite exhaustion, was an accumulation of power that others could never match. Here is the hard lesson. You don't rise because things feel good. You rise because you are willing to suffer more than anyone else. Humans didn't win by being stronger. They won by being relentless, by being consistent, by being willing to endure when others quit. That is the mindset that flips impossibility on its head. Stop asking if the moment is right. Stop asking if you are ready. Stop asking for permission from comfort, fear, or doubt. Ask yourself this: am I willing to endure the pain, the struggle, the grind, the loneliness, the chaos necessary to win? The answer determines everything. Victory is not about talent. It is not about timing. It is not about luck. Victory is about endurance, suffering, persistence, and the refusal to let excuses dictate your life. Humans won the impossible war because they embraced that truth. They didn't wait for inspiration, they became it. They didn't wait for courage, they acted despite fear. They didn't wait for the world to align, they forced it to bend. And that is the final realization. Willingness to suffer is not optional. It is the only way forward, and it is the single most powerful weapon anyone can wield. Here's the third truth, and it cuts deep. Your biggest enemy isn't failure. Failure is visible, tangible, easy to blame. You can point to it, analyze it, curse it, and even use it as a lesson. But failure is not what stops most people. What stops most people are their own patterns. The same routines repeated every day. The same excuses that whisper comfort and delay. The same hesitation that convinces the mind to wait. Humans won the impossible war not because they avoided mistakes. They failed, constantly, repeatedly, but because they refused to let patterns of inaction, fear, and doubt dictate their outcome. Patterns are invisible chains. They are quiet, relentless, and deadly. You think small habits don't matter, but they decide every outcome, every success, every defeat. The patterns that hold most people back are easy to ignore. They are subtle, scrolling instead of creating, hesitating instead of acting, waiting instead of moving. They are routines that convince the mind it is alive while quietly killing ambition. Humans understood that mastery, power, and victory are not about one heroic moment. They are about consistent choices that align with purpose. Every repeated act of discipline, every refusal to give in to the comfort that seeks to smother ambition, every time action is chosen over delay, that is, what builds momentum, and momentum is unstoppable. Most people never see it because the patterns are invisible, yet they are the true battlefield, far more dangerous than any external enemy. Here is the brutal realization. No one will break your patterns for you. Motivation will not. Opportunity will not. Advice will not. Only action, repeated, deliberate, and ruthless, can shatter the invisible chains that keep you small. Humans won the impossible war because they attacked their patterns as relentlessly as they attacked the external enemy. They identified the habits that sapped their energy, destroyed their focus, and limited their potential. And they destroyed them piece by piece, day by day. Every repetition that reinforced fear, delay, or comfort was confronted and replaced with deliberate choice, and over time, that consistency became the foundation of victory. Patterns are deceptive because they feel safe, they feel familiar, they feel inevitable. But the truth is brutal. Any pattern that allows hesitation, fear, or comfort to dominate is a surrender, and surrender is permanent unless confronted. Humans knew that. They recognized their own weaknesses, traced the loops of delay and doubt, and refused to allow them to define the outcome. They failed, they fell, they were beaten, but they never allowed old habits to dictate the final result. That is the core of the impossible war. Defeating yourself is harder than defeating any enemy because it is relentless, subtle, and internal. The lesson is clear. Stop blaming circumstances. Stop fearing failure. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. The battle is not out there. It is inside. The enemy is not external. It is your own repeated choices, your patterns, your habits. Humans won the impossible war because they understood this and acted relentlessly to break the chains their own minds had created. To win, the same must happen now. Identify the pattern that controls you, attack it with action, and refuse to repeat it. Victory isn't about avoiding failure. It's about refusing to be defeated by yourself. Every person who wins does this. Every person who loses ignores it. The choice is yours, and the battlefield is closer than you think. The impossible war is still happening, even now, inside your mind. Every second you choose distraction over focus, every moment you let comfort replace action, every hesitation you convince yourself is justifiable is a loss. Humans didn't win by avoiding this internal battlefield. They won because they fought it relentlessly. Every small act of discipline, every refusal to surrender to doubt, every choice to move forward when nothing felt right, became a victory. The war is not measured in grand gestures or heroic moments. It is measured in the accumulation of countless tiny victories that most people overlook. Momentum is invisible until it is unstoppable, and humans understood that better than anyone else. What feels insignificant is the foundation of the impossible. Every day, every choice, every repetition matters far more than people realize, and yet most refuse to act. The internal war is unforgiving. The mind will lie. It will convince you that waiting is wise, that fear is truth, that comfort is necessary. It will whisper excuses so subtle you don't even notice them, until years later you wake up and realize the life you imagined never materialized. Humans won the impossible war because they stopped listening to those lies. They named them, confronted them, and acted despite them. Every hesitation they ignored, every doubt they overcame, every choice they forced themselves to make added up into a chain of momentum that could not be stopped. That is the hard truth. The difference between victory and failure is often not external, it is internal, invisible, relentless, and unforgiving. Most people surrender here long before the war even begins, and then wonder why life feels like loss. Here is another truth. Every repeated choice reinforces your position. Every second of distraction, every act of avoidance, every moment of compromise strengthens the enemy inside. Humans understood this. They knew that the impossible was not won in a single strike, but in the disciplined accumulation of actions day after day, often unseen and uncelebrated. Every small act of courage, every deliberate decision to move forward despite fear, every moment of persistence while others quit created a compound effect that became unstoppable. The enemy doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be repeated. Humans attacked their weaknesses with relentless repetition and turned what seemed like ordinary effort into extraordinary results. Every day that passes without deliberate action is a defeat. Every moment spent negotiating with fear, comfort, or doubt is a concession to surrender. Humans won because they refused to negotiate. They refused to pause until progress was made. They refused to allow internal resistance to dictate the outcome. The impossible war is still being fought inside every mind that hesitates, and it is won one act at a time. Every small decision to endure, every refusal to quit, every choice to act despite fear builds the unstoppable momentum that leads to victory. The final realization is clear and brutal. Waiting for external validation, for perfect conditions, for clarity, is surrender disguised as patience. Humans didn't wait. They acted relentlessly, consistently, and deliberately. Every small victory over internal resistance became the foundation for conquering the impossible outside. The war is internal first. Victory begins with the smallest, quietest acts of discipline. Every moment spent acting despite doubt is a victory, and every moment ignored is a defeat. Humans won because they fought the war within, relentlessly, without compromise, and without excuses. The same battlefield exists for anyone who refuses to surrender. Here's the final truth. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your habits. Every dream, every ambition, every someday you whisper to yourself is crushed or carried forward not by luck, not by talent, but by the tiny repeated choices you make every day. Humans didn't win the impossible war because they were extraordinary in ways others could measure. They won because they refused to let their habits betray them. They refused to let hesitation, distraction, and comfort decide the outcome. They won because they acted over and over, even when fear screamed louder than hope, even when failure loomed larger than opportunity. The battlefield is in the choices you make right now, in every moment you decide whether to move forward or stand still. Excuses are the luxury of those who have already surrendered. Humans didn't wait for clarity. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for courage to magically appear. They created it through action. Every step, no matter how small, mattered. Every moment of discipline, every refusal to quit, every time they chose struggle over comfort added up into a force that nothing could stop. That is the brutal reality. The war is not won in moments of ease or inspiration. It is won in the grind, the repetition, the relentless refusal to be defeated by your own mind. Most people don't see it because the work is invisible. Humans won because they embraced the invisible. They fought the unglamorous, uncelebrated, and painful parts of the war that others ignored, delayed, or denied existed. Here is the stark choice you face. Continue to surrender to patterns, to comfort, to doubt, to delay. Continue to convince yourself that waiting will make you ready, that life will become easier, that success will arrive unearned. Or refuse it. Refuse it all. Act now. Move despite fear. Persist despite discomfort. Destroy the habits that betray you. Stop negotiating with excuses. Stop giving the mind a vote over action. Every second spent waiting is a second the impossible slips further away. Every choice to act, no matter how small, is a step toward claiming what others say is unreachable. Humans won the impossible war because they refused to wait. The same refusal is available to anyone willing to take it. The impossible war is not abstract. It is personal. It is immediate. The battlefield exists inside your mind, in your habits, in your decisions. Humans conquered what seemed insurmountable not because the world bent to them, but because they refused to bend to the world. They fought the war inside themselves first, relentlessly, without compromise, without mercy. The final truth is this. Nothing external can defeat you if you refuse to be defeated internally. Every habit changed, every fear confronted, every act of persistence compounds into unstoppable power. That is how humans won. That is how the impossible becomes inevitable. So act, not tomorrow, not next week, not when it feels right. Act now. Destroy the patterns holding you hostage. Embrace the struggle that others run from. Refuse excuses, refuse hesitation, refuse surrender. Every second counts. Humans won because they refused to stop. The question is simple and merciless. Will you? Every moment is a choice. Choose action. Choose struggle. Choose victory. Refuse anything less. The impossible war is here, and it is yours to fight.